What if one laugh could collapse 10 years of loyalty in 10 seconds? I walked into Dorian Shaw's glass-walled office with trembling fingers and a portfolio that had taken me months to perfect. Every page inside was evidence data mock-ups, case studies of a decade spent turning Helix design from a boutique agency into a recognized industry name. I barely got the words out. A 10% raise, I said. Given my contributions to the Avery Holloway and Marin projects, I believe he burst out laughing. Loud, open, careless laughter that bounced off the walls and sliced through my pride. A raise, Dorian finally choked out, still grinning. Sienna, be serious. You're a support function. You execute the vision, we create it. He leaned back in his designer chair like a king dismissing a peasant's request. I sat still, my hands gripping the edge of my portfolio so tightly the leather creaked. I'd led those projects concept to final. I'd stayed late while he networked over wine. The vision he took credit for had been built pixel by pixel in my apartment at 2 a.m. If you think you're worth more, Dorian added, eyes cool, now try your luck elsewhere. There it was. The sentence that shattered something I hadn't even known was fragile. My belief that loyalty, work ethic, and quiet brilliance would someday be noticed. I nodded slowly. I understand. As I stood, my voice caught in my throat. 10 years of showing up early, staying late, mentoring interns, never asking for credit, reduced to a laugh and a smirk. He was already checking his email. Back at my desk, I passed rows of awards I had helped win, none of them bearing my name. I sat down, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen, and thought of the prototype sketches buried in my home hard drive. Systems Dorian had ignored. Features the company had quietly rolled out 6 months later. Implemented, profited from, without credit, without permission. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a flash drive, the one marked Private SC. On it were designs I had built in solitude on weekends, on flights and coffee shops. They had never touched Helix's servers. The thought hit me so fast it nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. What if I wasn't just allowed to leave? What if I was the one holding the keys all along? My phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in months. Milo Chen, Altura Studio. 3 words in his last message. The offer stands. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and finally smiled. What if the ideas they rejected were the same ones that built their empire? That night, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, surrounded by notebooks and hard drives. My laptop screen glowed with folders I hadn't opened in years. Files labeled Neural Flow, UX Cascade, Visual Compass V3. None of them lived on Helix's servers. None had been created on Helix's time. But every one of them had shaped Helix's success. I clicked open a folder from 4 years ago. Inside were wireframes and predictive UX flowcharts, design logic that later showed up in our flagship project for Holloway Hotels. They'd praised Dorian for his innovative guest experience interface. But those sketches were mine. I knew because in the corner of each page were my initials, SC, and timestamps. From late nights on my kitchen table, I scrolled through dozens of entries, remembering the evenings I'd worked alone while Dorian partied with clients. I hadn't minded at the time. I believed that good work spoke for itself. But now I saw it clearly. It didn't speak. It whispered. And they had drowned it out with applause, meant for someone else. Sienna. These are yours, my sister Ava said, holding up a thick sketchbook I hadn't touched in ages. She was sitting across from me, flipping through the pages like a lawyer preparing for court. Which in fact she was. These notes are dated. You built these systems at home. And you never signed over intellectual property rights in your contract. Correct, I said, my voice flat. Standard employee agreement, no specific clauses about personal projects. Then Helix has no legal claim. Ava's tone sharpened. You do. My fingers hovered over my phone again. Milo's message was still there. The offer stands. He'd reached out twice in the last year. Once after I presented a concept at a tech conference, one that Helix shelved. But Altura cited in their own pitch deck weeks later. The second time after he read my name buried in the footnotes of a patent Helix filed. I never responded. Loyalty, fear, maybe both. But now, make the call, Ava said gently. You don't owe them your silence anymore. I nodded, heart pounding. I tapped Milo's contact. It rang twice. Sienna, he answered immediately, like he'd been expecting this moment. I believe we need to talk, I said steady now. About everything. There was a pause, then warmth. Are you free for dinner tomorrow? I looked at my sketchbook pages of overlooked brilliance. I think I finally am. If someone recognizes your value instantly, do you still need to beg? The restaurant overlooked the Charles River, quiet and dimly lit with candles flickering on every table. Milo stood as I approached, dressed more casually than I expected, no suit, just a blazer and rolled sleeves. It felt intentional, disarming. Sienna Calder, he said with a half smile. 12 years too good for the spotlight. I raised an eyebrow as I sat. I preferred to let my work speak for itself. He chuckled. The problem is, you let someone else translate. A waiter poured water. The menu sat untouched between us. Milo leaned forward. I followed your work for years, he said. The sudden evolution of Helix's UX systems, the intuitive UI layouts that didn't exist before you joined. I knew it wasn't Dorian. My breath caught. You're that sure it was me, I'm sure, because we tried to reverse engineer those systems and couldn't. And because Dorian once pitched us a concept he clearly didn't understand, he paused. I knew we needed the person behind the pixels, not the poster boy. I stayed quiet, emotions twisting inside me. Recognition was a drug I hadn't realized I'd been starved of. What exactly are you offering? I asked finally. Milo didn't flinch. Director of UX Systems at Altura. Triple your current salary. Stock options. Your own team. He let that hang before continuing. More importantly, credit. Your name on your patents. Proper IP protections. If you bring your personal systems, we'll formally acquire them. Transparent compensations, legal documentation. We do this right. I blinked. You'd buy what Helix used for free because we value ownership. And because it's the right thing to do. I pulled a worn leather sketchbook from my bag. I'd debated all night whether to bring it. Now I laid it on the table. These are the blueprints, dates, diagrams, notes, all developed on personal time on personal hardware. He flipped slowly through a few pages. His eyes widened slightly. This is what's powering Helix right now, he asked. I nodded. And they never asked to own it, never compensated, never even acknowledged. He closed the sketchbook with reverence. This changes everything. I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not just as a producer, but as a creator. You have no idea what you've just set in motion, Milo said. I met his gaze. Actually, I think I do. What if walking away quietly is the loudest thing you'll ever do? I slid the resignation letter across Dorian's desk, without ceremony. He didn't look up right away, just kept typing as if I were another admin delivering mail. When he finally glanced at the letterhead and saw my name, his fingers froze. 2 weeks' notice, he said flatly. Yes, I replied, calm and clear. He set his keyboard aside, leaning back in his chair with that same smirk that used to make me shrink. This time, it just looked small. Where are you going? He asked, tone casual, but his eyes sharp. Altura. The smirk dropped. You're joking. I'm not. For the first time, Dorian's posture shifted. We're mid-negotiation with Porter Lynn's team. You're the lead designer on that pitch system. I nodded. I know. I built the delivery model that got us that meeting. His mouth open-closed. Then came the pivot, smooth, familiar. Let's talk about retention. Maybe that raise you mentioned. Or a title change. Lead creative strategist, perhaps. He was bargaining. Too late. I already have an offer, I said. Triple salary, equity, team leadership, and recognition. Dorian gave a tight laugh, but it rang hollow now. They're overestimating you. Once they see what you actually produce without our infrastructure, they'll walk it back. I smiled. Not bitter, not smug. Just free. We'll see. Later that afternoon, I was ushered into a corner conference room where Marisol from HR waited, her reading glasses perched on the tip of her nose. A stack of papers sat in front of her. Standard offboarding, she said, flipping to the highlighted sections. Non-compete. NDA. Affirmation of no proprietary assets being removed. I read them carefully, then looked up. I'm not signing the non-compete. It wasn't in my original agreement, and I won't add it now. Marisol frowned. It's standard. So is undervaluing employees, I replied. Doesn't mean it's enforceable. She didn't argue, just moved on. When she asked if I was taking any Helix property, I said simply, no. But I am taking my personal work, the systems I created outside this office on my own time and never signed over. There was silence. Then I stood. Goodbye, Marisol. I walked out of Helix Design with nothing but my sketchbook and a quiet kind of triumph. No slammed doors, no dramatic exits. Just the soft, unmistakable sound of a door closing for good. When your silence ends, whose voice shakes first? 2 weeks later, my nameplate was on the door of a glass-walled office, this time one I actually earned. The energy at Altura was different, clean, collaborative. People asked questions because they cared, not because they were looking to take credit. My team of 6 designers had been briefed before I arrived. They treated my work like something sacred. On my 3rd day, Altura launched its new pitch to Porter Lynn's chain of retail showrooms, a package built entirely on my systems. The UI was faster, more adaptive, and offered dynamic scalability that Helix could only mimic clumsily. Within 48 hours, Porter Lynn canceled their pending contract renewal with Helix. I found out the way everyone else did, a breaking alert in Design Weekly. Titled Altura Wins, 18 billion contract Helix was poised to secure. I stared at the screen, a strange cocktail of pride and ache in my chest. The comment section was already filling with speculation, new system, radical interface, not Dorian style. Exactly. At the next design expo, I spotted Dorian across the room. He was surrounded by half-interested junior staffers and one visibly annoyed client. Our eyes met for a brief second. He didn't smile, neither did I. That night, Altura's CEO, Elliot Brandt, asked me to join a video call with a key investor. We need to know how long until we can patent your base frameworks, he said. They're ready, I answered, with clear documentation, timestamps, design evolution, and proof of ownership. He leaned back and smiled. Your systems are elegant, Sienna, but what makes them unstoppable is how clearly they came from you. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. For the first time in 12 years, someone in power saw me, not just what I produced. A week later, I received a PDF from Design Weekly's editorial team. They were preparing a feature titled The Woman Behind the Interface Revolution. My name was in the headline, my photo, my work. I printed the draft and pinned it to the corkboard behind my desk. No applause, no announcement. Just a deep, solid breath. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't even raised my voice. I had simply, finally spoken. Can they sue you for what they never respected? It started with a courier envelope dropped on my desk, thick, glossy, and stamped with Helix's law firm's logo. Cam Altura's in-house counsel stood beside me as I sliced it open. Let me guess, he said deadpan. They're accusing you of stealing what they never bothered to pay for. He was right. Helix had filed suit in state court, misappropriation of proprietary design systems, breach of implied loyalty, and the most absurd intent to harm reputation. In other words, I'd done too good a job at Altura, and it hurt their pride. Milo called an emergency meeting that afternoon. Elliot, the CEO, dialed in. Cam walked everyone through the claims, then calmly laid out our response. She has complete documentation, he said, motioning to the folders I'd handed over 2 weeks ago. Timestamps, device metadata, witnesses, and most damning for Helix, email evidence. My heart thudded. Emails, Cam smiled grimly. Your sister found them. 2 years ago, you sent Dorian a proposal to license your systems formally. You outlined fair terms, he replied. Just implement what works, we'll figure out details later. A quiet laugh rippled through the room. They had their chance, Milo said. And now, Elliot added, we'll have ours. In court, I sat in the front row behind Cam as he laid out our case with surgical precision. He displayed the original sketches, time-stamped screenshots, and internal Helix memos that referred to Sienna's stuff without ever crediting me. When Helix's attorney claimed I had exploited proprietary knowledge, Cam simply asked, can you show us the signed IP transfer agreement? Silence. 3 weeks later, the judge dismissed every count. His statement was blunt. Employers who ignore the value of their employees' innovation cannot retroactively claim ownership when those innovations leave with their rightful creator. Helix's lawsuit had collapsed, but the fallout was just beginning. The next morning, I received a message from Tobias Nash, senior reporter at Design Weekly. Congratulations on the win. We're updating the headline, Designer Who Defeated Goliath and Built Something Better. Care to comment? I looked around my office. My team was already brainstorming improvements to our latest rollout. I thought of how Helix never even let me present. Now I was running the meeting. I replied to Tobias, no comment. My work speaks just fine. How many innocent careers get shattered by one man's ego? 2 days after the ruling, my inbox filled with messages from names I hadn't seen in years. Some were polite, some were raw. I was just laid off. They closed our whole department. Do you know anyone hiring? By the end of the week, Helix had cut over 80 employees. Departments gutted, projects canceled, clients fleeing like mice from a sinking ship. At first, I felt vindicated. Justice, right? But then came the names I couldn't ignore. Carmen Doyle, our former UX lead, smart, overlooked, fired without notice. She showed up at Altura unannounced, waiting for me in the lobby. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked smaller somehow, like someone who'd spent days holding their breath. I'm not here to ask for a job, she said, arms crossed. I just wanted to see for myself if it was true. That you brought them down. I didn't respond. She exhaled sharply. They let me go the same morning your interview ran. No severance, no explanation. Just gone. I nodded, unsure how to apologize for something I didn't regret doing. You were right, she said finally. We all knew it. We just didn't believe you'd actually leave. As she walked away, I felt the weight of something I hadn't anticipated, not guilt exactly, but gravity, collateral damage. That night, I opened a spreadsheet. In the first column, names. In the next position's department's contact info. Within hours, I'd cataloged 54 former Helix employees. Ava texted me after midnight. You okay? I typed. Then deleted. Then typed again. I think I started a fire. I didn't expect to see who it would burn. The next morning, Milo called me into his office. You've seen the headlines, he said. Helix is hemorrhaging. We're getting resumes by the dozen. Dozens of people, good people looking for lifeboats. I placed my spreadsheet on his desk. I've already started. He raised an eyebrow. What is this A-list of everyone I know who got caught in the fallout? I want to talk to Elliot about starting something formal, an initiative to hire them, retrain them if needed. Milo was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Let's build something they never saw coming. But this time, make sure everyone gets credit. What if rebuilding others was the best proof you'd rebuilt yourself? We called it Project Reclaim. Not a PR stunt. Not a mercy mission. A blueprint for how to value people the way Helix never had. Elliot approved it in under 10 minutes. It's the right thing, he said, and the smart thing. We launched a dedicated portal on Altura's site, prioritized interviews for any qualified former Helix staff, and partnered with 2 training firms to help reskill designers, project managers, even administrative staff. Those too close to retirement were offered consulting retainers. Within 72 hours, over 300 applications came in. By the end of the first week, we'd hired 28 people. I personally called each one. Some cried. Some didn't believe it was real. One voice cracked halfway through the call. I used to work across the aisle from you. You always stayed late? I never said thank you. Now it was my turn to be speechless. Carmen joined as a senior UX consultant. It wasn't a pity hire, she was damn good. And this time, she got the credit she'd long deserved. We gave her the project lead on our onboarding platform for Reclaim. First meeting, she walked in with a vision board, a team brief, and a confidence I hadn't seen since our early days at Helix. It felt like watching someone come back to life. The industry noticed too. Design Weekly ran a follow-up article, Altura builds the future with the people their competitor discarded. Clients brought it up in meetings. One executive said it's rare to see a company that wins and lifts people. Our open applications tripled again. And for the first time in a long time, I started sleeping through the night. One evening, Marlene, former Helix HR director, showed up at my office door. I said I'd never work corporate again, she said, with a tired smile. But consulting for a company that actually listens? She slid her bag onto the floor. I'll need an office with a window. You've earned it, I said. She grinned. I never thought I'd say this, but it feels good to come back. And it did. Not to Helix, but to what Helix could have been if someone had cared enough to see the people holding it up. We weren't just building platforms now. We were building dignity. And for the first time in my career, I wasn't the only one standing. Would you still forgive the person who once made you feel invisible? He was waiting in the lobby when I stepped out of the elevator, leaning on the wall beneath the Altura Studio logo, like it didn't sting to stand there. Dorian Shaw. His hair was less polished, his suit rumpled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept well in weeks, maybe months. I won't take much of your time, he said before I could speak. I crossed my arms. I doubt that. He looked around as if realizing for the first time that this was where the power had moved. That the glass offices weren't just decoration, they were the seat of decisions. Ones he no longer made. I'm not here to argue, he said. I'm here to acknowledge. That word hung awkwardly between us. I made mistakes, Dorian continued. I took your work for granted. I told myself you didn't care about recognition because you never asked for it. But the truth is, I didn't ask either. I stayed silent. He shifted his weight. Porter Lynn, Holloway, Eastwick. We've lost them all. And now, I'm out. The board forced me out last week. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt done. As if that chapter had already closed long before this conversation. So what do you want, Dorian? He swallowed. I want to recommend your Reclaim program to our remaining staff. They're good people. They didn't deserve this fallout. The request caught me off guard. You want Altura to pick up the pieces, I said slowly. I want them to survive, he corrected. Even if I don't, I studied him. For once there was no ego, no performance. Just a man finally understanding what power really was and who he had misused it on. I'll bring it to Elliot, I said. But understand this, I'm not cleaning up your legacy. I'm correcting the part of it that could have been different. He nodded and something in his expression softened. Before he left, he turned back one last time. You really were irreplaceable, I know, I said. As he disappeared through the glass doors, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt resolved. Not because he finally saw me, but because I no longer needed him to. What if revenge wasn't the goal, just finally seeing your name in ink? 1 year after I walked out of Helix, I stood at a podium beneath a banner that read, Innovation in Human-Centered Design, National Awards Gala. Camera flashes burst like firecrackers. A sleek black plaque with my name engraved in gold sat in my hands. Sienna Calder. Not unnamed team contributor. Not part of the back office. Just me. My name appears on 3 patents now, I said into the microphone. But the more meaningful victory, it's the list of names on the doors beside mine. People who were once overlooked now leading building thriving. I saw Carmen in the crowd, her Reclaim onboarding platform, just nominated for a separate award. Marlene sat beside her now chief culture consultant at Altura. In the 3rd row, Tessa, one of our youngest hires, waved when our eyes met. After the ceremony, Tessa caught up to me near the bar. That was incredible, she said, clutching a notebook. I've been working on a new predictive layout framework. I was wondering if... Send it to me, I said, smiling. And sign it. She blinked. Sign it. Everything you build that matters, put your name on it. Don't let anyone tell you it's implied. She nodded slowly, as if realizing no one had ever told her that before. Later that evening, I received a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a framed Wall Street Journal article titled, The Fall of Helix: How a Company Lost Its Soul by Ignoring the People Who Built It. A sticky note was attached. You were never replaceable. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hung it not out of spite, but as a reminder of what happens when value is ignored, long enough to grow legs and walk out the door. 2 weeks later, we hosted our first Women in Design IP workshop. Over 300 attendees. Ava led the session on contracts. Marlene ran mentorship pairings. And Tessa, now heading a small team of her own, gave a talk titled, How to Speak Up Without Burning Out. At the end, a participant raised her hand. Don't you feel guilty about how things ended with Helix? I paused. I feel responsible for my choices. But I don't feel guilty for claiming what I earned. There's a difference. As they clapped, I looked at the screen behind me, my algorithms, my name, my story. Not as revenge, not as proof, but as ownership. Because the greatest plot twist wasn't watching Helix fall. It was becoming the kind of leader I once needed and never had.